Welcome to the 100th Monkey Radio with Tom and Ramon. I want to wish everybody out there a very happy Thanksgiving. I hope you guys got plenty of turkey on the table and your cranberries are fresh.
I don't.
Well, Ramon, you're in Japan. You know, they don't make ovens over there big enough to cook turkeys in, so... You know,
no, they don't.
You're tough out of luck there, buddy. Yeah, so... Oh, yeah, the football games and visiting with friends and family and loved ones and thinking about all those things that we're grateful for. And, you know, if you sit down and think about it, you know, there's a lot that, you know, no matter where you're at and what you're going through, you can always find something to be grateful for.
What are you grateful for?
Me? You know, I am extremely grateful to be here right now in this time in the history of humanity and be a part of what's going on on the world right now, of the big change in consciousness that's happening, the awakening of mankind. You know, I am so grateful to be here at this time. You know, I'm grateful for my family. I'm grateful for Elizabeth. I'm grateful for you, Ramon.
Really?
Yeah, believe it or not. Even though
I was gonna say I'm grateful.
Even though I give you crap all the time, you know, I am grateful to have your friendship. So, anyways, we're continuing on with George Lobouno tonight, and you know, this is I don't know, something to be very thankful for. That's having somebody that has done the work, done the I'm sure he's grateful for the contacts that he's been gifted with in this lifetime, and yeah, I'm definitely happy about it. George, Ramon, anything?
Yeah. Well, I'm grateful for a lot of things. I'm very grateful, like you said, to be here and just to have the opportunities to do the things that we've been doing, all the different stuff. Also to my family and friends and wife, very grateful. And very grateful to our guests, all of them. George.
Yes.
What are you grateful?
I'm actually grateful too. I'm grateful for some of the things you were mentioning. That is, you know, the bigger, I don't want to say the bigger ball in bowling. It's as though it's slightly rotating, and when it slightly rotates, you know, it's sort of bouncing, you're resonating in a larger extent. So for me, it's really interesting. You know, in my case, yeah, contacts, you know, I'm glad that some contacts began. Although in the early stages for me, it's quite a challenge. It just seems always real. But, you know, the statement that, you know, they say to write a book is like falling on your knees from Paris to Istanbul. Well, it's kind of a real ordeal for me over the first year, and it took me time to get up to speed. And now I think you know I can do well enough. I can use this pen in a larger extent. We're talking about, of course, remote interaction involving very advanced, very intelligent aliens. Sometimes they're emotionally kind of a little bit more toned down. Actually, sometimes genetic engineering is done to dampen emotions, and also sometimes they're very, very old, because we're talking about aliens, for example, grays, estimated to live 300, 400 years to up to 1,000 years or more. We're talking about so-called virgins, 20,000 years. The virgins have dominated the great line reportedly, and even some aliens that are significantly, actually many times older than those, a much older duration. And you can imagine, imagine, say, if you live to be 150 and somebody said, hey, what do you think about these young guys on this planet over here and how they're starting to get their act together? You might think, those people, I'm old, they're all just a pain in the butt to me because they're old and cranky and whatever it is. And you sometimes wonder, what is the attitude regarding us? Because here we are. We live what is, in the eyes of aliens, I guess, it's a candle flicker of a lifetime. We're here and then we're gone. We barely have enough time to grow older and become mature and start having, those kind of more stable, more sustainable insights, and then boom, we're starting to fade out and we're gone. We're nothing. And compared to, I imagine, the aliens, we look pretty strange in that regard. But what we do encounter among them is this kind of dried out, desiccated, I've experienced it directly, desiccated kind of, in some of them, it's almost as though they don't feel what we feel, whether it was genetically engineered out of them or whether it's just age. And imagine, it's not just age, it's the harsh experiences some have gone through. You know, for example, if we're talking about the Greys alignment and all the crap that, pardon my language, they've done to manipulate and try to somehow steer human history toward a favorable, I guess you could say, dominance by their alignment, then, you know, they've seen all kinds of just garbage in human history, which we tend to read about and think, oh, that's great, isn't it? Humankind is, you know, people think, oh, America's the greatest in the world. Well, you no longer can think about the world alone. It's the world. You know, we just said everything has changed. And I hate to say that. I don't mean to echo this idea of, you know, 9/11, but everything will change very significantly when people start to talk more about aliens, especially if you're interacting in that sense. You just can't go back to where you were before. And so, well, go ahead. I'm sorry, I'm just going on.
No, go ahead. Keep on.
What I was going to say is that, you know, so here these, you know, the Greys alignment, and they seek apparently a kind of dominance and a use of, more importantly, a use of resources. Because, you know, I had this argument with some people. They say, oh, you know, guess what? The Greys and the Nordics, and, you know, they're all bunched into the same kind of abducting thing. They're here not because, you know, they're here because they want to help us. It's almost like spiritual, altruistic, and they merely need to maybe borrow our genes, and maybe they're going to try to help us at the same time. Meanwhile, if you really think about the information about them, for example, Philip Kraft's story is, as we you know, the pronunciation may go, he was suggesting that the Greys are kind of a much smaller kind of dependency or like minor population that has been essentially dominated by a much older population called Verdants who've been around where they were where we are 229 million years ago. It sounds like in a lot of time, but in the history of the universe, it's not as much time as it really sounds. And the point being is that they wouldn't be here. You know, the Verdants supposedly exist, and they have 27,000 other populations, probably kind of like Greys, or imagine something like us that fell into their orbit. And you can imagine the genetic diversity there. So when you hear this story by some people who, you know, they probably new contactees or maybe just only contact with Greys or whatever, and they say, you know, they say they're here, the Greys say they're here, and the Greys and their related aliens say they're because they need our genes, because they couldn't survive if they didn't have our genes. Well, the question is like someone raised in the last interview and said, what if they want to take our genes so that their people or their aliens can live here too? You know, in other words, like they want to get our adaptation so that they can. Or what if, for example, that whole story is just their story about needing our genes for hardiness because they've been, let's say, cloning, where you don't have that genetic diversity that's mixing in every new child. Instead, you sort of repeat the same genes that are genetically tweaked using technology, and then you copy that, and what you get is, you know, the same thing over and over again. You start to lose that hardiness that anyone who studies ecology or genetic diversity knows only comes through kind of diverse interactions. For them to say that, oh, they need our genes in order to survive, it's absolute, total hogwash. If you think about a large alignment of aliens with tens of thousands of different populations, or even just the one larger population that can go out and, for example, here, take genes that they want to. They'd have a huge, huge library of genes. They would never need our genes. Our genes are just almost, I won't say insignificant. It would be just another little place. So what I'm getting at is they wouldn't be here for altruistic reasons or just to take their genes. The fact that they would be here in numbers would mean that they're here to take resources, to occupy, to kind of expand domain for the same reasons that every monarchy or every, let's say, military hierarchy has tried to expand in some cases when they saw no resistance, that is. You know, here we don't have much resistance because people aren't well enough informed and or thinking about how to be more competent among aliens.
Yeah, well, they don't even believe that these things are really happening, so it makes it even easier.
Yeah.
Yeah, and look, where does that leave them? It's as though, but what I would say is this, is that I think more than a decade ago, we passed the point where any good literate mind that went out and sort of investigated this kind of weird news story, or you could see one thing on TV, it's like Paul Hellyer he saw the Peter Jennings special, and he thought, wow, that is really, there's something really going on. Checked in, he read Philip Corso, and then he asked his high-level contacts, and they told him, yeah, what Corso said was true, but that's only part of it. There's even more to it than that. And, anybody who checks on the situation can see that something is, there's reason to suspect that something is definitely going on. And so it's all moved past the point of, where people are safe to say that, maybe they exist, maybe not, but, I'm just sort of, watching to see whether it is, in either case. It's where people now, and also astronomers, for example, Stephen Hawking was talking about, he said, well, you can't be safe to assume that if aliens are out there in great number, that when they first arrive here, they would always be just friendly and, looking for a ride in Disneyland. Instead, you need to think that some might come here as colonizers in a sense, albeit, imagine he was suggesting a more technologically and probably slightly more civilized version, but they might seek dominion and see us as being just kind of easy rollovers for whatever they want to do. The point being is that astronomers, astrophysicists, especially after the Kepler satellite, found that there's at least there may be about 2 billion Earth-like. That's not Earth-sized. There are 40 billion or more Earth-sized, but Earth-like, possibly habitable planets in this galaxy alone. So now astronomers have to think, well, it's not just about whether or not aliens exist. It's about how prepared are we, how well do or would we understand them. So it's gone from data to analysis of the data, and now we're in the third phase. First, there was the data, and people couldn't believe that that's where we were, it was 1947, 65 years ago. Well, I guess somewhere in the 80s, 90s, enough analysis and enough actually, unrestricted data via internet developed, and suddenly we've got an analysis of what's really going on. But now we're at a point where we have the analysis, we have a basis for a larger understanding. Now we can begin to determine our own relations with aliens.
We've got a lot of information out there and a lot of data, but there's so much of that data that has been tainted by both the debunkers and those that are trying to the ridiculers, or the ones that are trying to steer us the wrong direction or away from it. So they throw the wrench into the works.
I've seen
part of the problem right now I see is sorting through that data in a sense to where you can find the stuff that's legitimate, that's real, versus the stuff that's just a bunch of crap that's meant to mislead you.
Yeah, there's kind of two schools. Actually, I'd say there's sort of two dynamics in disinformation. One is that as Corso suggested, that Nathan Twining said that our disinformation was an attempt to keep secret programs, supposedly from Soviets, even though the Soviets found out about Roswell in very short order. It was broadcast on ABC radio, and it was on the front page of the Roswell newspaper. But that Twining thought that, the disinformation itself would fall apart here and there, and information would begin to leak out. But they never quite, they thought the disclosure was going to be a slow leakage process. And now we see what some people call a kind of acclimation program, being greater leaks and, more people coming out of the woodwork and talking more openly without fear. But the problem is that this whole idea that there's going to be that kind of disclosure presupposes that at some point there's going to be somebody stepping out to say, you know what, we've been lying to you. We did, murder some witnesses and that back during the Cold War and so forth. And now we're going to tell you the truth, because nobody I know and nobody who's really arguing the facts convincingly indicates that they think that the U.S. government or any other government on this planet is really prepared to do that at present. And so that leaves the second part of the whole dynamic, which is, so the first part is that you have to, that maybe there's a kind of disclosure that's in the works. But the second dynamic is what we do when people already know who aren't waiting for the government. Do you advance the ball regardless of what they do? I mean, think about it. There's a kind of disclosure already has gone on. But the second part of that, probably more important, is that, do you really think the U.S. government or any NATO government is going to come out and give you the real straight story on aliens? I mean, they'd probably try to give you some spin or some partial story or try to cover up for what they did. The better disclosure that occurs is the real data that you're getting from people who've had actual experiences or don't have reasons to lie, and they're not contaminating the information, which is the big problem. Disinformation it poisons it all, so that it prevents people from developing the necessary analysis. But I would argue the analysis has proceeded nonetheless, because sometimes the disinformation looks so stupid. I mean, that you have a 98% good information, and there's that 2% in there that looks just ridiculous, that people realize, this is one of the tricks of the sort of military intel sort of industry. They throw in something that's just moronic. And if you see that part is clearly moronic, then you can look for their basis for what else they were saying. So what I was saying is, private, I don't want to say private because I don't think of myself as private. In an alien population, there's not going to be much in terms of what they consider private, because according to all accounts, aliens interact telepathically, and even of course when people say the same, and our technology shows that that's not only going to increase, but there's going to be technology to essentially boost mind signals. The point being is that if that's going on, then it becomes more easy for people to see the truth and know the truth. And the idea of like a private disclosure, which is what some people say, what's going on now, is where people, witnesses, contactees, abductees, people, once they get out of government, they said, that Gordon Cooper said he chased entire formations of flying discs. He was at a base when one landed on the tarmac above. They filmed it. He saw the film. The U.S. government came and just took the film away completely. And other people in those military nuke silos who said, discs showed up above their silos and started turning off their missiles like one by one. Or people who worked on programs who talked about, essentially when they do their disclosure, it's more often a kind of private thing. They're out of government service. And that leaves us with this one handicap, is that when does the government itself realize that it has a responsibility? I would put it even more focally. Let's say you've got a President Obama who now, after a second election, probably has a much better chance of disclosing information because he's not worried about being reelected, and he's been in there in office, and he's capable of like a nonpartisan tone, I would say. Whether you like him or not, the fact that the guy's in the second term and this time is advanced, it's more easy for disclosure with time, and this happens to be the president we have at the moment.
Right.
The point is that you can get a little bit more information out, I think, when people just aren't sitting there and waiting, for somebody to try to, claim, this is partisan political sort of crap. They're trying to win an election, or they're trying to, sway the congressional elections. Yeah, actually, 2 more years from now, 16 months, it's going to be, harder because, elections will be approaching, and then people get more sort of tricky about it. Point I try to make, though, is that I think when any government begins to start speaking, I don't want to say more openly, but to begin to actually it's like they're taking off the lid and saying, even if the first gesture would be to imply this is real, we need to be concerned about it, and then start leaking more information around the side. Everybody's looking for, when are they going to show us an alien body, or when are they going to say we have these craft in Wright-Patt Air Force Base, in S4, in Edwards Air Force Base, and, the one near D.C., I don't see our government doing that in the short term.
Yeah, I think something has to happen along those lines. Otherwise, if they were to show up in the skies right now, we would have so many issues with that external savior complex would be kicking in all over the place.
Or the security thing. How do we defend?
Exactly. I mean, I don't know. I just feel that there's besides what is happening out here in the woo-woo world, the UFO area fields and the consciousness and spirituality fields that are actually touching on these subjects. Besides what they're doing and what people like Ramon and I are doing, there needs to be something. I don't know, in some official capacity, in some form or fashion, I think, to and maybe this is coming, something to say, hey, they're just other beings out there. They're not any better or worse than us. They're I don't know. I just have a feeling that external savior thing is going to kick in with a lot of people, and I don't want to see humanity become dependent.
Yeah, I think what you have to watch out for is, there's two kinds of disclosures. One is partly just a limited but honest version. Another one is where you got this thing where there's a kind of a sub-regime here that says, guess what? Aliens exist, and we've also done a kind of a secret deal with this one group who can be our trading partners. And yes, they may have done some abducting, although we disagreed with that, but now they're going to be our good friends. And, maybe we can do big business with them. So the key words would be, in capital letters, would be big business, trade with aliens, totally different new kind of information. And how many people would fall for that?
Right.
It could be pretty scary in a sense. But what I would argue is that I think there's another threshold. It's a really important threshold. And some people, if you've read my first book, you're certainly aware of it. It's where we become competent to remotely probe or to compete in this mental environment. I don't mean mental in an abnormal sense. I mean in mind communications. Again, all contactees and abductees and not all contactees, all abductees and many contactees and whistleblowers talk openly about, the aliens communicate telepathically. And of course we can see why. You can communicate much, much more in a really short burst of information. It's as though you're resonating a lot all in one short space. So people sort of get the outlines. Remember we were talking about it in the previous segment about how you can do that. But the point being is that, when people start doing that, when people become just a little bit more competent in seeing, which is the topic of my next book, how you do this, how it feels, how it looks and feels when aliens do this, then people will realize that we can remotely investigate them, we can compete with them. You don't have to. We're in a situation now where, like you're saying, you got to watch out for disclosure, which is uncritical and which lacks a critical judgment of aliens. It's as though, they're come here to save us. So no matter what, the more desperate we are, the more people think, well, so what? What else are we going to do? We're going to sit here and just wallow on our own sewage, or are we going to let them come and save us? You don't want to be confronted with that choice because it has no analysis, no discussion, and more importantly, it has no comparison between different alien populations, which is the most important thing we need to do now, which is to compare different alien populations, what's good about them, what's bad about them, what we have to watch out for. And finally, I think we're now, in my book, my second book, I'm amazed sometimes when I'm writing it to realize that the discussion, not just mine alone, has evolved to this point where it's easy to see how people can read something like that or read my first book and become more competent and realize you don't just have to sit there and wait for them to come and tell you, we've been abducting for this and that, and, it's going to be a spiritual thing, and we're like God's little angels or whatever they say, which is some of the junk that people are actually being told. Instead, they're physiological liquid-based beings. You can study them. You don't have to be around them to do so, and you can remotely probe them over great distances also. And that's the most stunning new development, is that the most important thing about aliens and what we know about them is not their technology, not their gizmos. It's mostly the science, but it's the science of mind and how anyone on this planet, anyone listening, I put it good mind, capable mind and careful mind can do this kind of remote, sensing checking on them.
Yeah.
And the point being is, we can be more competent. We don't have to just sit and wait. We can initiate our own investigations.
Let's go deep into that, because in your book, Alien Mind, you really go very deep into the difference between our mind and their mind and how their mind works. Mm-hmm. Where it's a little bit hard for me to wrap my mind around.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say it's a little hard for me to wrap my mind around the way their mind works. Of course, these guys are traveling through intergalactic space, so of course, automatically their mind's going to be more expanded than ours.
Yeah, and also their exposure, their awareness of other worlds. Imagine, say, on a typical planet, just only slightly more evolved, or around just slightly longer than us, and they're already studying alien populations in every high school, in every college. Every kid, grows up thinking, wow, these are cool, that's interesting, this is not, this is good, this is bad. We want to be like them, we don't want to be like those other ones. You know what I mean? All of a sudden, they're not only learning about how aliens communicate and what the basic norms and standards are, off telepathy, you can use this kind of mind-activated mind sensing technology for education, for memory aids, but the problem is there can also be like a big brother abuse of that in some cases, and some people would be afraid to criticize their society, thinking it can, there's somebody who can detect my thoughts. But you have to get over that and sort of move beyond that, in like the second stage of that. But the point is that you have to sort of stop for a moment and think. We were kind of in a little box for a while. We were thinking only about human, power, human greats, human sort of quote facts of life. It's all about money and power and who can get what. And even though you think we should be doing better, we're stuck with this stupid routine, which is destroying the ecology and it's keeps crashing the economy. Where once you start, you take that lid off and you see that aliens are out there, and many of them have done obviously much better. You see that people would begin to realize that, it's not, we're not stuck in that little box anymore. So the point is, I'm trying to move the analysis to where it's not just an analysis of how we look at them here and think, like I said, it's not always a comparison to us. That doesn't work. You have to compare aliens to other aliens, because then you'll see how it already is out there. And whether to what extent you want to sort of assimilate that or be like that, that's up to you. But if you already know that it's already there, it's the prevailing way of being, you'll probably find direction in that pretty quickly. And the point being is that we're looking at, how they think and how there are certain fundamental assumptions. Is that minds communicate. It's that they had this new technology. It's called Scalars. You can call it gravitics. Some people call it zero-point energy. It's all the same stuff. Converges light waves, and then it just slightly contours or varies that energy, and boom, it's resonating out into it's not boom like a bang. It's just very subtle, in fact. It's resonating out into a larger space, depending on how you contour it. Your mind can actually do this very easily. So they studied that, the telepathy, this new technology, and they use this technology because it's really cool. It's an effect. There's an effect. It's what called Tom Bearden, a former Navy colonel who actually had direct experience with Soviet use of these scalars and probably eventually then U.S. use of this technology. He says it's called delta T. It's this gravitics or this new energy relationship called scalars or gravitics, however you want to call it, same thing. It can slightly speed or slow the flow of time. And that's because it involves a kind of a cycling of the universe into itself, into black holes and gravity, and also all the light that you see is coming from stars where, guess what? Atoms are being they're sort of going inward in that they're being smashed or sort of fused closer and closer together. So it's a huge, big thing that's going on. Black holes, gravity, and all that cycle, and all the light that we see is directly, unmistakably due to that, except for when you're getting a flashlight, you know what I mean? And so that's going on, and that's where this sort of gravitics kind of thing is happening. Meanwhile, we had this other energy that sort of resonates out in the environment. This new gravitic stuff, though, if it slightly slows time, imagine what you could do. You can focus Bob Lazar, whether you believe Bob Lazar was correct and real or not, there's much to suggest that he was, the S4 exists and that what he was talking about has a real basis. He said that he took this alien reactor taken out of some crashed disk or wherever they got it, and then he put this, it's called a waveguide. It means it's this sort of like half basketball-shaped reactor, which had this little chip up, he called it on-pentium. It's like a kind of a heavy nuclear sort of material that you bombarded it with neutrons, and it started this 100%, it's called annihilation of, matter and antimatter. 100% annihilation turning into light, or let's say electricity and light and energy. And they said all you had to do is you bring this tube over next to that thing, and this kind of gravity that's in there, again, gravitics, scalars, that you remember we were talking about that, it would channel, it's like called a waveguide, and you could focus it on a table. So he focused this stuff using 2 or 3 of these on a spot, and this spot it was like a dark black sort of circle, it was or sphere in the air. And it wasn't a black hole. It wasn't a thing per se. He said what was happening is that it was slowing time in the middle of that focus, Well, it was speeding light and things away from it and the outside that circle. So it slows time. Now imagine, say, you just sort of slightly lessen that focus and you point it at a chemical reaction. You point it at genetics in process. You're slowing them down. Or even, if you slow time enough, imagine it's like freezing stuff. And so you could do better science with this. The other part is that you could look at a cancer. This scalars could look at a body, and you could see where the cancer is located, and you could focus that. You don't have to it's not like a laser that's going to have to burn its way in there. It just sort of it sort of contours such that the focus is where the cancer is, and you could freeze it off, in little increments, like one layer here, another layer there, so you don't have. Or you could possibly even remove some of it so you don't have a rot and an infection hazard in the body. And so you could kill cancers, you can study chemistry, you can study genetics, these fast chemical reactions and things. It's just fantastic for science, and it's good for energy science as long as you use it carefully. So we're at this, it's this big threshold. You have these old sort of petroleum elites. You've got these people who, just been corrupt for generations, and if you're really honest about them, there's not much prospect that they'll ever really get it right. It's like humankind has never made any real significant advances when at least decided, okay, we've had enough with our party and taking everything and doing whatever we want and killing people, and now we're just going to let you guys have more power. People had to take power or disempower those corrupt and just, habitually corrupt elites. And that's what we're going to have to do in order to get all these new challenges. Here they are. We're looking at the new energy, the question of aliens. We're looking at the question of the ecology, and also the question of better sharing. Let's just say a more intelligent use of resources, economics, whatever you want to call it. It's all right here, right now, and even global warming. But if you're really honest about solutions, everybody knows. If you ask somebody, say, what do you think the solution to this problem or that problem is? Everybody's already got pretty good ideas about solutions. But the obstacles, they think, we can't really achieve those right now. And you ask them why, and they'll say, wow, these elite people, these are elite killers. They tried to steal away the effective carburetors, the Tesla technology. They tried to murder people who pose these alternatives. And even though there's less of that now, as far as we know, presumably, people are afraid. It's like, maybe they killed Kennedy, maybe they did Watergate, they've, tried to start wars and stuff like this. And people think, how are we going to convince those people that, nothing but total animal greed is the, that's not the solution. So people think they know solutions, but once they see the solution, they think, oh, how can you really do that with these kind of monsters on our landscape? Well, what I've been outlining certainly in my second book is that you don't have to worry about hidden monsters. The new science of mind, this remote sensing using scalars and doing essentially what all aliens on every single alien planet does, is that you can identify them. It's almost in a snap instant. It's as though in this remote sensing resonance, your perspective is like out above the whole planet, and it's, believe it or not, in an instant, there's an order in all of everything that's there. It's like a subquantum order. You can identify every single sort of, let's say, severest of offenders, and you can begin to actually monitor them or, do more direct kind of investigation of them. And it's essentially, there's a guy named Russell Targ, the guy who explained to an audience I was in, he said that during the Cold War, he and Hal Puthoff trained hundreds in the CIA to do remote viewing, remote sensing of a sort. It's like he said, the big secret is that there are no secrets. Mm-hmm. The point I'm trying to make is that this new science of mind will make it such that there's no hideout. There's no place for any, offending elites. If you're worried about things like, people worry about hearing about things like child sex slavery, about narco trafficking in intelligence operations, about, propping up dictators in order to use them to take things from them and even spread types of corruption into where they live, like the story of Miguel de Madrid down in Mexico, whose nephew ends up, or someone like one of his advisors ends up being a big weight person in narco trafficking later on, and that and so forth. They can all be seen through, and there's a new science of mind that allows for, almost instant investigation. As weird as that sounds to people, you read about it, you'll see what I mean. And aliens do this all the time. We're right at that threshold. So here we are, we're seeing all these problems. We've got these, we can see what they are. We know what the challenges are, but we know also that alien worlds have arrived at solutions pretty easily, although it's a struggle. There's this phase of struggle where they have to, or had to, disempower those perpetually offending elites. And I'm not talking about every person who's got an inheritance. There are certain people, and people know who they are. We mentioned that in one of the earlier segments, people that were named as being direct operatives of the gray alignments, let's say abduction, breeding, and reinfiltration. According to it's what David Jacobs' abductees is what John Mack hinted at, but Hopkins discussed more directly. Kind of an infiltration of humankind by aliens. Sounds weird. I know how weird it sounds, but why would they be abducting and creating hybrids and then developing those hybrids so that they look more and more human, except to put them on this planet? And we have information and sources on that, who those people are, and guess who you find there? The worst of our serial offenders, some of the chief names in like the petroleum sort of complex, the worst just cases of crimes against humanity in recent history. And, from that alien perspective, and this is not, remember, it's not aliens in our Milky Way galaxy that are native here, but from outside of it, trying to just get some little foothold here. Those aliens apparently might think, this is necessary for us to have influence there, and actually they're going to manipulate events towards their kind of outcome, which is, of course, is loss of human freedom, which would be a lot, would be their control, would be a strict hierarchy, and we'd just be doing what they say. And, I know this idea about aliens having, operatives on this planet sounds weird, but for people who have been following the subject, they've seen actual evidence and, really detailed, very, very good sources on this kind of thing. I'm not trying to make people paranoid about aliens, but, you need to be informed and you need to sort of know what abductees have been saying. Read David Jacobs' book, The Threat, for example, or read Mac's book, Abduction, and he's talking about, the breeding program, in his second book too, Passport to the Cosmos. It's a challenge.
Yeah, there's definitely a level we get to where it becomes very sobering, as your level of awareness of what's going on, there's a point where at least where I got to, where it was, I guess sobering is the best word I can use, when I looked out and went, oh my God, they've infiltrated so many places and they are pulling strings everywhere. It wasn't a paranoia that grew or anything. It was just it was an awareness and a sobering, going, okay, wow, come on, humanity.
And then you're probably thinking, like, how do we compete against that?
Exactly.
If we would lose freedom, and if it could become an Orwellian kind of just hierarchy, there was an abductee. The abductees, I think it was Mac was talking to these abductees, and they were actually saying this. One abductee, I think, I forget her name, I have her in my book, Alien Mind, was saying that, she was put in a room there, she's doing a visualization. She's taken up to a craft, she's sitting there, she's been abducted a lot of times. And at this point, she's looking at one of these screen sort of visualizations of a crowd sitting on a picnic, area in some grass. And the aliens are asking her, can you identify which ones are the alien hybrids, the ones who have been infiltrated down, versus the regular people in the crowd? And she said that was what the aliens were most afraid of, because they knew that humans can simply read the energy, and I'm talking about the gravitics, this kind of scalar resonance going on. And it's sort of, it's as though it channels towards, say, an outside alien location, or let's say a monitoring source, call it the Grays, or one of their craft, or one of their installations, wherever that might be. If they can identify that energy, they can easily point out these are the ones. These are the alien hybrids. And these are the others are the normal humans, and that's what they're most afraid of, because this new science of mind, you can pick that out. You can identify locations. If there is any alien base on this planet, it can be located in that way. And people are probably thinking, like, now wait a minute, wouldn't you have to have like a PhD times a PhD in alien everything to know where that is? No, it's because in the larger, just whole planetary sort of, call it a sub-quantum order of things, when you get a feel for what, an alien site or location feels like, you can just pop your perspective out where it's as though it's taking into perspective the whole of the planet. And it stands out to you very vividly. It's as though, like, when you're doing remote sensing, the difference between a planet and empty space is just bizarre and stark. Here's a planet, here's empty space. It doesn't take a genius to sort of notice how that feels. The same when you're talking about an alien site where it's high energy streaming, this sort of gravitics, and their use of technology and the way they think and feel, and you're going to feel that individual sort of So if you're going to sense the individual aliens doing what they do, and they're probably going to sense you when you're sensing them because they have what are called psychotronics. So you have to be discreet. You do like a quick burst of sensing there, then you'd expand your perspective and sense from slightly further out. Come back to it later, check again. You get a little more detail. Maybe you might even, in my case, I have no qualms. I will provoke them to see how they react, and then I'll expand it to boom. I'm looking at the whole, sort of looking at the whole site where they are. I go after them because I'm years down the road. I'm very competent in this regard. I can handle myself, and I can really take information out, and if they, bother me, I can get information out where other people can know, and they're not going to look too good. The point is that, go ahead.
Are there any other telltale signs that they give that any traits or commonalities that we can pick up on a physical level?
I'd say this. I'd say, you look at their genes, you're going to see zero doubt about who, which would be an alien and which would not. And that leads us to another sort of kind of painful question. We had this question about whether or not we're going to actually do genetic engineering of humankind. Well, anyone with common sense knows that, people are going to try to do genetic engineering to remove defects, to increase disease resistance, and more importantly, probably most of all, to expand or extend the lifetime of any human being. But when you start doing that kind of genetics, eventually, we've already got criminals are being tested, their genes are being tested. But then people are doing in utero testing of babies to see what they're like, or in some cases choose what kind of baby, whether they want this one to go forward or not. Well, you can see where we're not far away from where you're going to have. It's not going to happen. It's a hot potato politically right now, but people are going to be looking at genetics of everybody else for basic medical purposes. They're going to do a genetic test so you can know about what therapies, what genetic related sort of medicines and so forth you might use, and they'll probably corrective therapies using stem cells for cases where people need to sort of slightly change their disease vulnerability. But when you do that, you're going to be looking, if there's an alien sort of genetic profile in these hybrids, that's going to stand out like somebody honking a horn in to say, a quiet opera theater of a car. A loud car horn in the theater is going to stand out. Genetic alien genes are going to be standing out when people start doing those genetic tests and sort of looks in each and every one of us.
Right.
So, there's that too. So I think this is that we've got this question right now. The question is, who do you believe? So you have people saying that the aliens arrive here, have no flaws. They've evolved beyond any possible greed, any human sort of or animal ambitions or impulses. And then some of those people would say, Stephen Greer says that there aren't really alien abductions going on. That's all done by copies of alien craft made by the human regime. Also, Greer even says that he has sources that say that the aliens were actually created using somehow alien genetics, and they work for the human regime, which I would say is, that's kind of a stretch to me. I don't think you're going to be just that quickly making aliens that are going to work for you. You know what I mean? But more of a stretch is to think that there's no such thing as abduction. Some people have a blind faith that aliens are better, therefore they don't make mistakes. Meanwhile, on the other hand, you have this account, like the case of the so-called planet Iarga, I-A-R-G-A, where the aliens who contacted the Dutchmen about in the 1960s, he called himself Stefan de Neert. He was actually a prominent businessman in the Netherlands, and it was happening in the waters off of what's called the Hague near, which is called the I guess it's the famous government center in the Netherlands. He was told that the aliens said to him, what you have to watch out for is that there's a duality in all beings, and they can do great if. In order to survive, they had to have certain impulses and certain sort of animal, I don't know how to say it, just there's certain things that they're capable of doing for awareness and defense and just their own survival. And it means that they can be either very good, but also they have this duality. The opposite side is they can do great wrong and cruelty sometimes because it's just in their animal nature. So that's every alien you're ever going to meet has some of that animal nature in them. And so we have this argument going on where people say, some people are trying to insist that aliens can do no wrong. Other people are trying to insist that all aliens are going to be here to take what we've got and or destroy us, and that's wrong. I think that's wrong also. I think we have to be where just quietly and objectively discussing our evidence about aliens and seeing that some aliens abduct and they're obviously looking for material advantage. Other aliens offer information. Other aliens could be potentially troublesome, but they're not here necessarily being that way at the moment. So as long as we're prepared, then we can know the difference.
So just by your estimate or your guesstimate, what percentage of the population would you say are hybrid or aliens themselves?
Well, I would have to rely on other people's analysis. I'll give you an example. Let's see, who was it was talking? I've heard various discussions pointing to the incidence or like the percentage of people done in polling and in studies who may have been abducted in this country. For example, goes, I think, between 2, I wasn't this planet yet, I should have this information better, between 2 and 12 million. Between 2 to a certain higher percentage of the population.
Right.
It wasn't 2 million, it would be 2% or above. And that may be the case. Now, it may be, a smaller number, but I don't think it's anything above that. But of those people, only a very small proportion. I'll give you an example. In my first book, I mentioned a quote by an alien saying that we have to worry about at least 3,000 to 4,000 of the gray alignment's hybrids, of essentially well-placed hybrids that are in high levels of, in some cases, of human society. Some of them are not in high levels, and they're going to be people that you don't know anything about, and some of those could be the most worrisome because, they're sort of walking and working silently. But, we talked about the humans who are named as actually being direct operatives. And I'll just go right through the list really fast. My interactions, they started in 1995. They've gone for years. They've involved different populations, and it began with a group of aliens trying to help us develop a critique of the Greys because of how their intervention has begun to affect human society in sometimes very destructive ways. So they mentioned the names of direct operatives, and this will correspond with some people have heard about what's the so-called Illuminati. These just bizarrely weird people that seem to be wanting to just pollute and destroy human society. And the names mentioned were these as direct operatives of the Greys' alignment in their intervention were the French Rothschild, presumably some of the other Rothschilds. Let's see, David Rockefeller, some in the Vitamin part of the DuPont family, some in the Royal Saud family, some Dutch royals. Let's see, Goldman of Goldman Sachs, Bush Sr., as weird as that sounds to some people, and who else? I mean, there are more people that are mentioned in my book. But if you look at those people, those are that'd be the tip of the iceberg, because if there are 3,000 to 4,000 hybrids that you need to be aware of, if not worry about, then they're more. But what I was saying earlier is that I discuss and I talk at length about methods and techniques you can use to find any of those and to tease them out. In my second book, just in the process of writing it, this is actually developing and evolving even in better ways. I haven't even written down the most effective means. As an aside, if you read my books or if you sort of have heard from me on previous appearances, you know that I talk about how I was part of a human sort of telepathic community. I was most inept initially when I was younger, back when I was maybe 21, and I was not really up to speed. And contact began in 1995, and I was forced to get up to speed. And I think I sort of surpassed what was going on at that time because I'm keying on what aliens are doing, and that was a challenge to be competent with aliens. And that's a little bit different from trying to compete with the church hierarchy or whatever CIA or whatever sort of thing is going on in human society. And the point being is that you can see where the human idea of telepathy is just different from what the alien idea of telepathy is, and we're more competent now. We can start to feel out in a larger sense. You can instantly identify like who is or who is not directly involved in an alien's energy network, because it's very, very stark. Like say you find a hybrid that you haven't identified yet, but you can sort of put the dome of your perspective above a whole, let's say Western Europe, and you can it's sort of you will feel, it's as though you feel with your mind's energy. Once you become practiced in this, you'll feel where an alien's energy network, especially if you've familiarized yourself with the feel of the energy network. It's easy to do because Greys and their alignment are already on the scene. You'll feel it streaming to certain locations. then you sort of, kind of pull in closer, but you're not just like, you don't want to always put yourself like right there next to them because they may detect you, and then, some of these people could be dangerous. Keep a little bit of a distance from it, but we can find and sort of locate them, and the methods for doing so are very easy. It's much easier than it sounds. Once you're past the beginner's phase, you're already getting into advanced stuff, and people realize that. That's how telepathy and networks occur, and alien
Right.
children are, this story about alien children being given these sort of mind-controlled little sort of floating toys, and they practice trying to move the toys because they are forced. These are little hybrids. They look like half human, half alien. The abductees and they've seen these women have been taken up, and they're asked to hold or be around these kids because they're trying to make these kids a little more normal, not so cold. And they watch the kids doing this stuff, and they're practicing using this kind of mind energy. So aliens do it. They know how to do it. We need to know how to do it also.
Okay, I don't know if you want to go into this on the air here, but what can, using these remote energies, psychic energies, is there anything we can do to help get rid of the problem that we have here?
Well, which problem are you referring to? Our problems in general, our larger problems?
Well, the say we have one specific individual or a situation that's going down, being organized by a group of these hybrids that have their intention, and
well, I'd say
it's made aware to say a group of conscious individuals who understand how to do this remote sensing. Is there anything remotely that in along those lines that they can do to, say, thwart somebody's plans, or let's chase them out of Dodge type thing?
We have two routes of approach. One is the direct approach in identifying them as involved in an alien sort of dynamic, which is, remember, this is what mainstream scientists are arguing about. You have to watch out for an alien kind of intervention that may not be what you really want. You don't want to look like, you're being colonized in the same way that, the Europeans went out and colonized native peoples with little or no regard for their rights or whether their lives had any value. And so in that respect, directly identifying them. But that presupposes that we can get people up to understanding, admitting, A, that aliens exist, and then B, their science is different, and we're capable of actually identifying these individuals who are actually deliberately trying to sabotage human relations in order to give those aliens advantage. The second route is that that, you're aware of it, and that it's difficult to persuade much of the population that this is the subject of concern. Therefore, you use the mainstream media and discussion of normal mainstream ideas of crime and criminal networks to expose those people directly for that, for their economic and their criminal activities. So you're approaching it from two different directions. One is you're approaching to expose and organizing against them in terms of existing government structures and people's awareness of, with the normal news that they think is news. Because, believe me, there are like 13 to 15 different huge scandals, each of which is capable of revolutionizing the society's vigilance regarding this kind of corruption that's gone on through the black budget complex. And probably people can think of them, I would say drug dealing, the child sex slave trade, the new technologies, murder rackets, the use of illegal monies, environmental things like, let's say chemtrails, things like that, the use of downed alien technologies for, purposes they shouldn't be used for. So all this stuff, it's that's in the mainstream, well, not downed alien technologies, where people, if they find out, they'll be more than angry. So you provoke public consciousness, and you literally have to provoke a little bit. It's a little bit contentious, obviously. So we approach it from two different directions. One, you expose and you try to get people to do more. And on the other hand, you're sort of coming back around it, encircling the whole subject, because the alien subject takes the whole lid off anyway. I would argue this, that the simple, this new energy technology, these scalars, gravitics, whatever you want to call it, which can resonate nearly instantly across just light years distances, that subject is invariably going to force disclosure about aliens, or aliens is going to force disclosure the subject of aliens will force disclosure about that, because you cannot do one without the other. You can't talk about this new energy technology safely unless you talk about how aliens moved on to the second or slightly more developed phase of the study, so that they didn't use that technology for, they had ways to prevent misuse or dangerous environmental consequences of the new technologies. So the two come hand in hand. And we can see, anybody that listening to this knows, yeah, the alien story is already out of the bag. It cannot be put back in that box. It's out. It will forever be out, and it will grow more and more detailed. And that's why we're kind of moving the analysis to where people not only know they're capable, but that they can actually practice and develop their capability. And two, this new energy technology, it's not going to sit in the box either. It's already reportedly in black budget, some corporate production. You've heard, you probably heard, maybe read stories about who's producing some of it. So both of those things are going to one is going to force disclosure of the other. And you cannot prevent this forever. They will just keep coming out more and more. And what happens is that different generations of people start with a different assumption. The 50th generation or the 40th generation of this, this World War thing and then the Cold War thing. But younger people don't have that box where they think, I can't talk about stuff that's that controversial. They already assumed, aliens, there's evidence for aliens. And so they will approach all these subjects in a different way. For example, the old sort of disinformation guys, the Philip Plass and all those people, they used to say just really nasty things, and people just let them get away with it. But the newer sort of skeptics, they sometimes, I'll give you an example, James Oberg, the guy who was, I think he writes, he's like a consultant for CBS. I sent him a copy of my book, and later on he was saying, he's a skeptic, obviously, writes for Skeptical Inquirer. But to me, he was saying, or I think it was to somebody else, he was saying that anybody who was on a discussion board, where I posted this, this information, he said, anyone who writes as well as he does, anything as well written as that, deserves a read. So here's a guy who's a skeptic, but he's pointing to my book and saying it deserves a read. You can see that it's like a slightly different generation, and he's already in his 60s, I would imagine, James Oberg. Imagine what the younger skeptics are going to be like. They're conditioned by different times. Different generations are sort of starting from a different point, and that's one of the biggest things that's going to help us in the long run.
Yes, I definitely agree. Okay, well, we're at the top of the hour here, so we're going to take us a short little break and come back and go for a little while longer. Man, this stuff just fascinates me. It gets my mind, definitely gets the brain working and the thoughts flowing.
I actually, I'll ask the question, but I'll leave the answer for when we come back. I want to get into the difference between sexual and non-sexual aliens. And I'm talking about reproduction and non-reproduction. I'm not talking about the ones that have good times and the ones that don't.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure there's some of those out there too. So.
Yeah, it's called Tom.
Well, I am a Scorpio, so oh well. Okay, well, guys, we'll see you in the members section. Hit that join button and help support Ramon and I. Condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance. And
the love you deny is the pain you carry.
And George, your website is?
www.alienmindbook.org, and you can read my first book free on that site.
Great. Okay, we'll see you guys in the second segment.
Pharmacological dealers, zealots righteous in rebirth and worship. Mother Earth.